performance, but many candidates had poor debate performances, and live to tell about it and take a view from the White House after it. So, to America First Action, Political Action Committee Director of Communications, Kelly Sadler, Dow Jones Newswire's Chief Editor, Glenn Hall, and the former Tennessee Democratic Congressman Harold Ford Jr. Harold, end with you. What is your take on what Bloomberg does now? It's in a way good that he doesn't have to raise outside funds because he'd have a hard time coming up with them after the debate. Well, where is he going?
Nothing has really changed in this campaign. He remains the most well-funded, the most moderate, and the likeliest to be able to take down or defeat Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders remains the premier progressive in the race. And the question Democrats had before the debate is the one we have still today. Who do we think is best situated? I'm a Democrat, to take on Donald Trump and to defeat him in the fall. And even after the debate, they were not Bloomberg supporters or supporters of Buttigieg or supporters of Klobuchar or supporters of Biden who believe that Sanders is that candidate. Admittedly, Mayor Bloomberg did not have a great debate. He'll have another opportunity at it next week. I suspect he will do much, much better and will continue to ask the question of voters. Whom do you believe has the best chance of defeating Trump? If you see Buttigieg and believe him, he's running out of money. Warren is bragging that she's raised more money because of her performance in the debate. You won't have that issue with Bloomberg. So Bloomberg's going to have to be crisper, smarter, better, and be the Bloomberg, the fighter that he was here in New York as mayor in this next debate.
You know, he does have a lot of money, to his point. I'm just wondering, though, whether that debate performance has stopped his rise. We won't know until we see more polls, I guess, and he's not on the ballot in Nevada. I don't believe he's on in South Carolina. So his first test would obviously be, on Super Tuesday. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's too soon to count him out. The money has made a big difference. We've seen how it's influencing the behavior of the other candidates and influencing the behavior of the voters. So, one debate isn't the end for him, but he does need to step up his game. He's got to come out with a compelling message and fire up a base right now that he hasn't fully won over.
Kelly, I get the distinct impression that the White House wants Bernie Sanders to be the Democratic nominee. I could be wrong, but is that because they view him as the one who's easily beatable?
Well, I mean, there's such a contrast of records, right? It's freedom versus socialism, and we can easily, put that message forward. I mean, the majority of Americans are against Medicare for all. I mean, the Culinary Union in Nevada is against Medicare for all because it rips it out of the hands of, private insurance and your private, care provider.
I know that, but is it a sense that he's beatable because these views are deemed extreme even within the Democratic Party? In other words, I hear more criticism still of Michael Bloomberg than I do of any other candidate, maybe because he's the big worry. What do you think?
Well, no, the Wall Street Journal had a poll out. 67% of Americans are uncomfortable having a socialist presidential candidate. And I think that's where you're seeing some unease with Bernie Sanders. And that is something that we will exploit on the campaign trail. Now, with Bloomberg, I mean, if the Democrats want to have someone come in and buy up their nomination, that's for them to do. But right now, we're seeing a total fraction in the party. You've got the socialists versus the centrists. None of the centrists look like they want to get out. None of them are going to team together to have one solid candidate. So I agree with you. I think that we're going to see a brokered convention.
All right. You might want to, run the other way. Normally, I'm not always pressing on these things. Let me ask you, Harold, about the president, where he stands. He's looking at his highest poll numbers, like ever, of his presidency on the economy, certainly the highest. So his argument and the White House argument is, bring him on, bring him on. What do you think of that?
Which is why you need a candidate like a Bloomberg or a moderate candidate to be able to take him on. I think a candidate.
You didn't mention Biden there.
Or Biden. I don't mean to take Joe Biden out of the conversation. I don't mean to take him out of the conversation either. But if you're President Trump, or if you're a Democrat looking at those numbers, the highest he's been. He's sustained this number for a little bit now. He had lower numbers in 16 and won. The economy is performing at the rate it's performing. You need a candidate who can describe where we are and how he's going to take us, or she's going to take us to a different place. And I think in this instance, it's two candidates who have the best opportunity and best chance to do that. But we got a long way to go in this race. Ms. Sadler, listening to her talk about Bloomberg and him buying up the race, if that's the only gripe they're going to have against, or one of the big gripes they'll have against
It's not the only gripe, believe me. There's more to come.
You
can't take it on the debate stage either. Imagine him versus the President of the United States on a debate stage.
Well, we welcome. I'm sure Mike Bloomberg would welcome that opportunity, and we'll see how all of it plays out. But the reality is, Bloomberg has run a big city. He knows what it means to bring about an economic renaissance in the city, as he did here after 9/11. And Democrats, again, it boils down to the simple question that we've been dancing around a bit. What do Democrats believe is their best chance to win the White House? And which person at the top of the ticket will allow Democrats to preserve a majority in the House and maybe win one in the Senate? I don't think it's Sanders, and I think increasingly Democratic voters are going to have to answer that question in primaries and caucuses going forward.
Yeah, someone said that Sanders would be the George McGovern candidate. A lot of passion in the base, but not much in terms of reaction at the polls. We don't know. But let me ask you about how the markets are playing this, because I don't think the markets are factoring anything political at all. They don't see a problem with the president getting reelected. What happens if they do?
So what I hear from folks in the markets is that aside from the coronavirus, they're happy with the way things are playing out because a stalemate in Washington is the ideal scenario for the markets. Things status quo, and then you can make your bets, right? So they're looking forward to that. But I think the other side of this, Neil, that really needs to be factored in is the economy, right? The economy is actually doing pretty well. Who gets credit may be up for debate, but the president is doing a very good job of taking the credit and making sure people know that this is his economy. And we see in those polls that you're talking about that the state of the nation, the sense of how our economy is being managed, is very high, and the president and Republicans are getting the credit for it. And I think that's part of the bump that the Trump president got in the recent polls. That and the kind of bump we see as a sort of acquittal validation, which we also saw in the Clinton years.
Yeah. One question he's going to have to answer, this president, with the economy: we are running $1 trillion plus debt every year. When Bloomberg came in to be mayor of this city, the city was running a big deficit. He turned that around. I think this matter, when I was in Congress, Republicans stood for fiscal responsibility. I got beat up in my own party as a Democrat because I believe in arithmetic. I was a blue dog Democrat. Right. We've now moved so far away from that. And the question is, if you have Sanders and Trump running, we will run $2 to $3 trillion, depending on whichever one of those guys wins.
It's not even in their top 10 issues.
Right, because it is unbelievable.
That's because of where the economy is masking those things and this sort of ongoing growth story that people are telling themselves.
I don't doubt
now
it,
that
but
we see,
it's a little disheartening.
Depending on what happens between now and the election, if we start to see further erosion in the economy or the markets suddenly freak out in a much bigger way, that could turn the tide.
No, you're right about that. Real quickly on that, Kelly, Mick Mulvaney is apparently worried that Republicans are looking hypocritical on this debt issue. The acting chief of staff saying, this used to be an issue we own. I'm paraphrasing here. And we've dropped the ball, and it's going to come back to bite us. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that the president is building up his political capital right now. The economy is doing well, and that once he sails into a re-election, deficit spending is definitely something that he can take a look at and has an opportunity to rein in without, the Democrats in an election year basically charging Republicans of pushing like grandma off a cliff, trying to cut spending.
Well, they both do that, right? Including Republicans.
Well, I mean, the president's running uncontended. I mean, he's the nominee.
No, I know, but they were controlling this. You're the guy in the White House, and you're submitting budgets that have these record deficits. That's on you, right? Like, I'm the one who eats the donuts, right? And it's on me for getting fat, right?
But the budget is kind of a fiction there, Neil.
The budget needs to be approved by Congress, and it never is. The ball is always kicked down the road, and I'm saying once the president wins re-election.
But you know what would be really impressive? If a president in either party submitted a balanced budget, just for the hell of it.
The last one that did that was a Democrat, I might add.
No, you're right about that. You're right.